Hey everybody, Lonnie here. I wanted to take a moment as I'm working on my channel and producing more videos to step back a little bit and talk about the industrial Internet of Things. This term has been is widely used in my industry. People talk about the industrial Internet of Things all the time, and there's just this general assumption that everybody kind of knows what we're talking about. When I think a lot of people, especially people outside of the area that I work, they have no idea what the industrial Internet of Things is. So I wanted to take some time just to explain from my perspective what it means to me and why I think this is a really important subject, and why I think that you should probably give this some thought yourselves as far as why you might want to get involved in the industrial Internet of Things. So anyway, this is my story, and I'm going to stick to it. So just to throw out a statistic to try to show how significant that this industry is. Last year, during my research, I found a research paper by Grandview Research, who's a business intelligence research company, pretty well known, and they are estimating that the industrial Internet of Things market will be 949 billion by 2025. So that's a pretty big number and not that far away, only 5 years away. And that's just one company that's done research that talks about this industry. You can do some searching yourselves, and you'll find that there's a lot of other papers out there that are like that are really talking about how big this market is. So what are we talking about when we're talking about the industrial Internet of Things? Before we talk about that, though, let's talk a little bit about what does the term Internet of Things even mean? The Internet of Things is really kind of a relatively new term. I would say maybe the last 5 years or so that it's come into kind of mainstream and people hear about the Internet of Things. So this has been predicted for a while, and it finally, in the early teens is when it started really happening. And the Internet of Things is just talking about sensors, and sensors are producing data, like temperature is a good type of sensor. Maybe if something's open or closed, like a door, is another type of sensor. So there's all these sensors, and they're getting installed in various places like people's homes. And that data these sensors produce goes somewhere and somebody does something with it. And the Internet of Things is really talking about how do we connect all these devices together and get the data out of them and start using them to figure stuff out and to control things. So the things is talking about those devices, and the Internet of Things is just talking about the interconnectivity of these devices over the internet. This really kind of came to I think came full bore when Alexa and Google and those types of companies started producing these smart devices that you could speak to, and then all of a sudden you're turning things on and off, and you're able to communicate with your lights, those types of things. So that's the Internet of Things, and it's not. And the industrial Internet of Things kind of borrowed that, I think, and said, well, we're kind of the same way in industry. And so the industrial part is talking about really any company that's making something. It could be a pharmaceutical company making some kind of medication. It could be a food and beverage company that's making maybe some kind of, I don't know, some kind of beverage like a iced tea or something like that, or canned peaches, you name it, any kind of food and bev. Could be a utility that's generating electricity and delivering that to cities. Could be a building where the buildings are air conditioned and heated, and there's various controls around the systems for a building and trying to keep it comfortable for the occupants. So there's all these industries that produce things, and they have sensors, and all that getting connected together is called the industrial Internet of Things. So if we kind of like go back a little bit and talk about how did this happen, and how do we get here, I think it's kind of an interesting story and something that I've experienced in most of my career. And it started, I think, in the 1980s is when, if I were to think back of all the things that had to happen for us to get here. In the 1980s, manufacturing companies and plants that are making things like automotive, let's say, for example, they started doing a lot of plant automation because computer chips just came on the market, kind of became more mainstream, and so controllers, the smart controllers, and things that could control equipment started being produced, and everything became computerized. And so that allowed a lot of repetitive tasks that were normally done by people or mechanical mechanisms to be replaced with these computer controllers. And so that started happening in the 80s and the early 90s. And a lot of the early automation projects involved retrofitting plants and building new plants. So the whole semiconductor industry kind of came on the scene, and that was one of the things that happened out of that. From there, everything started getting interconnected at the plant level through Ethernet. Ethernet is a networking protocol, and their equipment came out so that all these devices could now be connected together and communicate with each other. And then you had whole plants that could coordinate the manufacturing of some product. At that point, people kind of became interested in the information that all this equipment was producing, and realized, hey, if we look at this data, we might be able to figure out how to better run our plant, how to figure out where things like bottlenecks are, where do we need to optimize, what do we need to spend our money on. If we spend money, did we actually improve the things that we thought we would improve? Could we improve quality? Could we reduce waste? So all these types of things became big drivers for companies to start improving their manufacturing processes and essentially improving their bottom line, because it can make things more cheaply. And this is really when mass-produced items came on the scene, and things like people started going to China, and China really became like a manufacturing hub, and all that started happening in the 90s. So all this data was getting collected and stored on servers and in databases, mainly at the local level. So then, as the internet started evolving and the capabilities of the internet improved, uh, the communication to the plants and these local area networks started becoming interconnected into what's called wide area networks, WANs. And so that just allowed now for companies to look across their entire enterprise and figure out, okay, what do we need to do? How could we coordinate? And what are the various plants doing at any given time? So this really gave a lot of visibility into something that was really hard to see before. And this was all like near real time, right? Because you could see this stuff as it was happening. You could see this information as it was being produced. So you can imagine an amount of data that started getting saved off and just continuously generated from these large scale operations. So that really kind of tied into, I think, the last piece that needed to fall in place for the industrial Internet of Things to really happen and to be where we are today, and that is cloud technology. So Microsoft, Amazon, Google started building these data centers, and the data centers then allowed us a place to move all these computers and all these systems out of the plant level and into a cloud infrastructure. And then that could reach down and collect all this information from the plant floors and store it in these large databases that could be done at scale. So huge databases collecting huge amounts of data. And that is really kind of like the last component the last thing that had to happen. So that is where we are now. And that is what, when I think of the industrial Internet of Things, that's really what I think has happened. And so we're at a point where it's kind of a new world, because we've never had access to all this data as quickly as we do now. And with the rise of like machine learning and artificial intelligence, that's what's allowing a lot of this that technology to be used, because frankly the data was not there and it was not accessible. and couldn't be manipulated and searched quickly, then those technologies wouldn't work. So we're at a really cool spot, because this all this data is sitting here and being collected, and companies are realizing there's enormous value in this data, and so that's spawning this huge uh, wave of spending, and people trying to figure out, okay, what can we do now that we kind of like have all the information and we have all this technology to better enable and to allow us to go places where we never were able to go before when it comes to industry. So this literally spans across any sector that you could think of. Anybody that has any kind of manufacturing or process, which it's hard to think of one that doesn't. And this data that's getting collected is just enormous. So that is in short what the industrial Internet of Things is, at least to me. I wonder what you think. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you think there's opportunities in this area for you? I think this is an awesome place to maybe begin a career as a young engineer or software developer, and I think it's just super exciting to see all the things that are possible. I've been working, in this area, through the 90s and the 2000s now, and I've seen all this evolve. And I remember thinking back in the 1990s, oh man, the data in these plants is so valuable. There's so many things we could figure out, but there really wasn't a great way to collect all that and get to it. And now we're at a point where it's all here, and it's all like possible. So my imagination goes wild. I start thinking about all kinds of things could be done, and it's just super exciting. I think this is a great time to be involved if you're thinking about the industrial Internet of Things, and if you're a company and you're not taking advantage of all this data that's being produced and storing it away. I think that it's a matter of time before somebody in your company says, we got to do this. So yeah, super cool stuff. And that's pretty much what I wanted the point of this video. I just wanted to make something real quick and talk about, what the industrial Internet of Things is to me, and why I care about it, and why I think it's so important and exciting. All right, my name is Lonnie. Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and I'll keep producing them. This is kind of one of an early test of just doing a video where I'm going to talk to the camera, and I'm going to talk more about this subject and in different areas as time goes on, assuming that this is going to work out. All right. Thanks again. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.